One.
Okay, we're here talking about trail clearing and brushing and whatnot, and this is the result of brushing that did not happen, I suppose. We call these box bangers. A mule comes in here with panniers on it. It's probably 5.5, 6 feet wide, and it's hard to get around this without the mule having to go way around, impacting the trail, bumping it, and possibly going into a frenzy. And you don't want to be around a pack string when several mules are acting up. It's actually a scary thing. So these should be cleared as much as possible. Everywhere I've ever worked, we have them. It's just part of what you deal with. But this is a good example of why you want them out of the corridor when a big pack string comes through. Trail brushing, here we'll define it as removing young trees from the trail corridor that will grow into be large trees and obstacles eventually. A common spec for trail widths for brushing is 8 feet wide by 10 feet high. That is what I'm familiar with, but you talk to your Forest Service overseer or contact in the district you're working on and understand that very clearly, because that's important. Sometimes smaller corridors are encouraged because they understand that pack strings won't be on the trail and things like that. Sometimes larger are encouraged because there's a possibility of 2 pack strings passing each other. I mean, which gets crazy wide how much you need. But that's where rapport and communication with the Forest Service people is really important. So for an 8 foot wide corridor, I'm going to say I'm 6 feet tall roughly. I have a 6 foot wingspan, so I need another foot out on top of what I have here. That means this guy, this guy, this guy, these guys. I think this might be an aspen or a cottonwood. These guys all go because they eventually will grow into be big trees that invade the trail corridor. And you haven't, when you see how wide a mule is with a pannier on either side, you'll realize why this is so necessary to have a wide trail. A lot of these trails here, I think, I'm under the impression they don't get pack strings. That's, once again, where communication with the Forest Service will really help you determine what you should be doing and not doing here. This work's best done in the springtime when you can pull seedlings and saplings out and it's loose soil. With stuff like this, you'll need saws of various kind, maybe loppers. The trail work looks much better when it's completed if all your cut trees are collected and put off the trail in a screened place. That helps quite a bit.
Bill, you mentioned how it's tough back-breaking work. Are there any tricks that you know to take care of your back?
Loppers help. A Pulaski directed at the root of a small tree right at the base is a lot easier than pulling it out. In some cases that could help, so tool use is an answer. Something else I just thought of that you don't want to do is, this is the way I was taught, might be different in other places. When you leave your, when you cut your tree, you don't want to cut it with a lopper so it's a pointed punjar, leaving a pointed little 4, 5, 6 inch stub up in the air. Ungulates can step on those, and the interior of their hooves are soft tissue, and they can get puncture wounds there, go lame, and eventually die because of the infection. So I was taught to cut them level, which is much harder, or to dig the roots up entirely rather than leaving stakes up in the air.
How about some of that soft vegetation, like the grass and the kind of herbier looking stuff? Do we need to dig all that out, or just the bushes?
Herbier plants, what are they called? Woody? There's woody and there's
herbaceous.
Brush like 9 bark and that kind of thing, which is very common here, we typically do not cut out. It'll drive you crazy because it grows back so quick, and it's never going to be a trunk that incurs on the trail and knocks a panniard sideways of a mule going by. Does that make sense? We're here on a trail, and we have some roots and rocks in the trail. Generally speaking, your rule of thumb is you want to leave your rocks in the trail if they are embedded in the trail. They create stability with the soil and inhibit erosion. If a rock is sitting on top of the trail, it should be removed. Same with roots. If they're embedded in the trail, they should remain there. They not only are they the lifeline of the trees, but they're also inhibitors of erosion because they're in the trail holding soil in and slowing down erosion when water's running down the trail. And also, this is the backcountry, it's the wilderness. There is a certain amount of hardship that visitors understand that they're coming to deal with when they come here. And these trails are not made like city parks. This is the wilderness, and they're a little rougher than what you would find in, say, an urban setting. Okay, trail clearing is something volunteers can do. It is some of the work's inherently dangerous, and that should be avoided. But first of all, this is a good example here of some nice trail clearing. I have a 3-foot wingspan off the center of the trail, and these logs that are cut here are well off out of the corridor. Otherwise, they would be box baggers again when the pack strings come through, but these are not. The situations you want to avoid with inexperienced people are timber to cut that's in the air, like right over my head, and under tension, which means it's bound up in a way that it could snap back on you if you cut it. And this is both, I believe. It looks to me like tension on that log here, coming on that tree here, coming this way, and tension under that. It's bending it like this. You could possibly cut it and have it snap back and hit you, which is dangerous. A good thing to avoid for inexperienced crews. Instead of working on this and doing it, what I would do is, if need be, I'd even build a little reroute around it and let the professionals take care of it if this were a situation that I had here. Trail clearing is basically cutting common non-dangerous trail clearings, basically cutting trees that are laying down across the trail. It's done very well with rock bars to leverage up so your tree's not binding. Pulaskis work well as leverage also for that. A good crosscut team is something that works really well together. And then sometimes they're single crosscuts, sometimes not. But basically a 3-person crosscut team is good. 2 people running the saw and a person swamping. And swamping is actually picking the timber off and throwing it off the trail. So here we have a water bar. It is designed to run water off the trail. They are constructed so the water's diverted off the trail diagonally. They're fairly complicated structures to build, but there's some basic rules of thumb you can follow that make them easier to build. And a less than totally experienced person can build them if he or she follows these rules of thumb. One thing I do is that is controversial, but I do this with volunteers and less experienced crews, is I tell them to build their structure at 45 degrees across the trail at an even diagonal. It's not perpendicular, nor is it parallel, it's halfway between them. That's a good round number that diverts water off the trail in a way that does not collect too much silt as silt is carried down the hill with the water. The drain pan, which is this part right in here, should be beveled back and easy to walk in of and easy to walk out of. No places to twist ankles and no places for walls to break down that create loose soil that create more erosion. The mouth of the drain, when possible, I say should be 2 shovel widths wide. That's not possible here because we have rocks in the way, But perhaps this can act as my shovel spade, the spade of my shovel here, and it would be too wide. This one is fairly close, but once again, we're limited here by a rock that keeps it from being bigger, that keeps it from being as big as you'd want it. The reason for the 2 shovel widths wide is if you have a little narrow mouth of your grain pan, one stick and plug it up, cause water backup, cause soil pickup or erosion, silt drops, and your drain is plugged pretty quickly. If you have 2 shovel widths wide, there's a lot of room for it to go around, and your drain lasts much longer, maybe 2 or 3 seasons before you get back and can clean it. When you're excavating these or cleaning these, all excavated soil goes back on the trail downhill from the ridge of the structure, and I'll define ridge right here as the high point right here. Even though you're throwing in a lot of cases vegetable matter back on the trail, it deteriorates pretty quickly, and you are not contributing to erosion by throwing soil off the trail. That's really the cardinal sin of this work, is throwing your soil off the trail.
How about all these sticks and duff and stuff like that?
Rake them out, clear them out, however you get them out, because they will inhibit clean water escape. And the skill to dig those, it's kind of a feathered kind of digging, and it's an acquired skill. A lot of people just want to blast and dig a hole. It's harder actually to dig small amounts. It takes, but that's, yeah.
And then just something else I always add is you never want, like the bones of this, there's like rock all running under here. You never want, or it could be a log, whatever, you never want water to touch your structure. So that's like this bit of dirt is critical, you know, like people want to dig right up to the edge of it, especially when it's already a fairly exposed bar that's seen erosion, and you want this because this is good for stepping, and if it's too steep, whatever steps there will push dirt back down and stuff. Practice on that.
And that overlaps with what I'm saying of gently in and gently out and gently contoured slopes. It's the same.
Same idea.
Okay, check dams are what they sound like. They're put in the trail at a perpendicular angle, and they dam up the flow of water coming down the trail. They're also called check steps and retainers. The rules of thumb for putting them in are they are placed perpendicular to the direction of the trail, as opposed to water bars, which you just talked about, which are placed diagonally on the trail. Edge of the step should be level. So in other words, if you're installing a log right here as your check dam, you want it level to the planet, meaning water won't run out one side or the other. Water bottles make great leveling tools to see if you actually are level or not. A newly created step is probably should be no more than 2 or 3 inches up. That's debatable, but I think for a lot of people, a 3-inch step is actually quite a bit, and it is an easier walk. Sometimes on steeper trails, you'll have to build them 5 inches or something like that. I believe code in houses is 5-inch steps. So that's as much as you want to do if possible. It's not always possible though. All excavated soil to dig this out goes uphill on the trail from the rock or the log you're putting in place. That's another just hard and fast rule that if you're throwing soil off the trail, you're exacerbating erosion and not helping.
So Bill, you put the soil uphill of a check dam, but downhill of a water bar.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Water bars need you're creating a step, so this is the landing here for this. And for a water bar, the part of the thing that holds the rock or the log in is that mound of soil that is the barrier for the water diverting off.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to talk about rehabbing impacted sites that we want to renaturalize. And this includes inappropriately placed campsites, abandoned trails, and things like that. So the first thing you want to do is transplant vegetation. And you want to match vegetation for vegetation. Where I'm standing right now, some obvious good vegetation to transplant would be saplings and seedlings. You're not limited to that. You could do grass plugs and 9-bark if that's possible, things like that. But eventually saplings and seedlings are great because they grow into trees and will be a tremendous block to people coming in here 15, 20 years down the line. But in the meantime, you've got to make other efforts that block further use. So match vegetation types. Lodgepole pine or Doug fir here, what would match here well, so pick them out. When you're moving vegetation, whether it's grass or seedlings or saplings or 9-bark or sage or whatever it is, or grass meadows, you want to establish your hole, identify where you want to dig your hole first, dig your hole, then go find your plant. That way, when you're bringing a plant in that's hopefully surrounded in dirt, covered in dirt like a plug, you're minimizing your chances of exposing the roots to air, which will eventually kill it if you leave it too quickly. So dig the hole first, put the plant in second. You want the plant a little bit below the surface of the trail so it collects water. When I'm digging seedlings and saplings, I go for the smaller the better because they're easier to move. And I say my experience is if you don't, if you dig something that's bigger than your shovel spade, which this is acting as my shovel spade today, that means the root structure is as big as that, and you're going to be exposing it to dirt if you dig something bigger than your soil spade, than your shovel spade. So here's my shovel spade. I'm putting it next to this. It matches it, but just barely. So I would use this, but I would rather use something smaller, and you're safer, and you're likely to get more a higher survival rate. This work is much better done in the spring and the fall when the soil is damp and rains are more common. Transplanting in the middle of the summer is challenging at best, I would say. Again, when you dig up your plugs, whether it's grass or whatever, try and leave the root in a wad of soil, thereby not exposing them to air and reducing the shock when that thing is in a new home. Transplant randomly. People will come in, well-meaning volunteers, and it'll make it look like a garden, and it's just a natural thing people have. Be on your people all the time to put 2 or 3 trees together and leave a bare space, have one separate one there, and keep it random or it won't look natural. I can't tell you how prone we are to wanting to make everything orderly and all of that, and that's not what we're after here. We're after a natural setting, of course, a natural appearing setting. To discourage further use, you're going to have to put obstacles down over on top of your rehabbed plants. A common volunteer trick is to take this and throw it on there and do that maybe 100 times, and you think you've done it. That does not work. First, they just get moved aside, and people will continue to use it. The most effective plant or objects to obstruct traffic are big downed trees that it takes an entire crew to pick up and move into place. It takes a lot of teamwork and it's challenging, but that stops the use of the social trail if you put them in the right place. A 10-person crew can lift up a tree a lot bigger than a 4-person crew, but that's what you have to figure out when you're doing it. But take the time to move the biggest stuff you can, place it squarely on the trail, and you're going to increase your chances for discouraging use of that trail. for stop, and this is in high alpine areas. This is helpful too, where you're above tree line, is bringing in large rocks, burying them tombstone style, and placing them in the natural path that people would want to walk, making it harder for them to do it, to further discourages use in the places you want to discourage that use.